My husband called me a simple housewife at our anniversary dinner in front of the CEO of Vertex Industries. 6 months later, his company collapsed when their biggest client pulled out overnight. Now he works in the mailroom of my corporation, the same corporation that secretly acquired Vertex Industries 3 years ago. Simple housewife, indeed. A simple housewife like Elena wouldn't understand the complexities of corporate acquisition strategy. My husband's words hung in the air of the private dining room at Le Crillon as he raised his champagne flute. Around us, the cream of Boston's business elite shifted uncomfortably in their chairs. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I maintained my practiced smile, the one I'd perfected through 8 years of marriage, and smoothed the napkin across my lap as if it were suddenly the most important task in the world. To the support team behind successful men, Gregory continued, his voice carrying across the meticulously arranged table where silver anniversary decorations glinted under crystal chandeliers. The wives who know when to step back and let business happen. I caught Amanda Reeves's eye across the perfectly arranged white orchid centerpiece. As CEO of Vertex Industries, she'd been instrumental in their latest market expansion, though my husband didn't know I'd personally approved her strategy. Just yesterday, her slight frown was nearly imperceptible, but I recognized it immediately. The same expression she wore when we negotiated particularly challenging deals in my private boardroom. Actually, Greg, Amanda interjected smoothly, I'm quite interested in Elena's perspective on the— Oh, Amanda. Gregory waved his hand dismissively, the diamond cufflinks I'd given him for our 5th anniversary catching the light. Elena's perspective is best saved for choosing dinner menus and organizing our social calendar. Right, darling? His fingers dug into my shoulder with what others might mistake for affection, but I felt the possessive pressure behind it, the subtle warning I'd learned to recognize years ago. 8 years of marriage had taught me to read the signs of his impending social spiral. The slightly too tight smile, the third glass of champagne arriving before the main course, the increasingly loud declarations about his business acumen. Around us, the private dining room buzzed with nervous energy. The executive team from Vertex Industries, Gregory's most crucial client, surrounded our anniversary table. Waiters in crisp white jackets circulated silently, refilling water glasses and replacing silverware with practiced precision. The 7-course anniversary dinner I'd spent weeks arranging was unfolding perfectly, except for my husband's mounting condescension. Tell them, Elena, Gregory continued, the ice cubes in his 4th drink clinking against the crystal. Tell them about that time you tried to understand my company's merger proposal. He turned to Michael Chen, Vertex's CFO, who I'd had coffee with just this morning. Can you imagine? I had to explain to her that some business concepts are simply beyond a housewife's grasp. Some people are just meant to support from the sidelines. I observed the subtle reactions around the table, mentally cataloging each response. 3 executives checking their phones beneath the tablecloth, Amanda's whitening knuckles around her fork, and Michael's carefully neutral expression that couldn't quite hide his discomfort. After orchestrating hundreds of business dinners myself, I could spot a failing one from miles away. The waiter appeared with another round of drinks, and I watched as he placed a fresh whiskey in front of my husband. Gregory's hand trembled slightly as he reached for it, a tell I'd learned to recognize years ago when we first met at that fundraising gala. Back then, I'd found his confidence charming, his ambition attractive. I couldn't have imagined how quickly that confidence would curdle into arrogance, or how that ambition would blind him to everything and everyone around him. You know what makes a successful man? Gregory's voice grew louder, words slightly slurred as he addressed the increasingly uncomfortable table. Having a wife who knows her role? Elena here has perfected it. No ambitions beyond our home, no silly career dreams competing with mine, just a simple housewife. And that's exactly what I need. My phone vibrated silently in the hidden pocket of my dress. Another update about tomorrow morning's board meeting, no doubt. I watched Amanda check her phone, too, her expression carefully neutral. We'd spent months planning this, and Gregory's behavior tonight was making it almost too easy. Mr. Harrington, Amanda spoke up. Perhaps we should discuss the projected timeline for the projections can wait, Amanda. Gregory's voice boomed across the table. I'm teaching everyone a valuable lesson about success. Behind every great man is a woman who knows she's just a housewife. Isn't that right, Elena? The silence that followed felt like a physical weight. I could feel every gaze in the room, some pitying, others knowing. With deliberate precision, I lifted my water glass, took a careful sip, and placed it back on the table. Each movement, measured, controlled, just like my response to his latest display of condescension. Actually, Gregory, I began, using the same quiet authority that commanded my own boardroom 3 times a week. I'd love to hear more about those projections. His laugh cut through the air like a knife. See what I mean? Adorable, isn't she? Trying. To participate in business talk. Next thing you know, she'll be asking about market volatility and offshore holdings. My phone buzzed again in my pocket. Another update about tomorrow's announcement, no doubt. The timing couldn't have been more perfect. As Gregory continued his monologue about knowing one's place, I glanced at Amanda, who gave me an almost imperceptible nod. In less than 12 hours, everything would change. But for now, I was content to play my part as the simple housewife one last evening. A toast, Gregory suddenly declared, raising his glass unsteadily. To the perfect wife, one. Who knows her place and keeps to it. He turned to me with what he probably thought was an indulgent smile. No offense, darling, but some of us are just meant for bigger things. The corporate world requires a certain instinct that you can't learn from planning dinner parties. I raised my glass along with the others, my smile never wavering. If Gregory had been more observant, he might have noticed it didn't reach my eyes. If he'd been less focused on himself, he might have caught the knowing looks exchanged between me and several Vertex executives. If he'd been sober enough, he might have realized that his biggest client's board members were paying more attention to his wife's reactions than his words. In 12 hours, everything would change. But for now, I was content to play my part, to be the simple housewife for one last evening. After all, I hadn't spent years building one of Boston's most successful technology conglomerates by being impatient. Sometimes the sweetest victories are the ones you have to wait for. As I excused myself from the table, Gregory's voice followed me down the hallway, still regaling his audience with stories of his business prowess. My wife wouldn't understand the complexities of what we do, he boasted. She's better suited for planning our next dinner party. In the powder room's elegant solitude, I checked my phone again. 3 urgent messages from my executive team and a brief text from Amanda. Everything is in place for tomorrow. Board approval confirmed. All subsidiaries aligned. I studied my reflection in the ornate mirror, remembering the exact moment 8 years ago when I decided to keep my professional identity separate from my marriage. Gregory had seemed different then, ambitious but respectful, confident but kind. The change had been gradual, each success hardening him, each deal making him more dismissive of what he called domestic talents. But tonight was different. Tonight, the carefully constructed wall between Elena Harrington, devoted wife, and E.J. Mitchell, CEO of Mitchell Technology Partners, was about to crumble. As I reapplied my lipstick, my hand steady despite the anger, simmering beneath my composed exterior, I could still hear Gregory's words echoing in my head. Simple housewife. If only he knew that the simple housewife had orchestrated the acquisition of Vertex Industries 3 years ago through a complex network of subsidiaries and holding companies. If only he realized that his biggest client ultimately reported to his wife. If only he understood that his increasingly poor management and ethical corner-cutting had finally exhausted the patience of the very woman he was busy dismissing over champagne and anniversary cake. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Tomorrow, Gregory would learn exactly what a simple housewife was capable of. But tonight, I would endure one last dinner as the smiling, nodding wife he thought he had married. I returned to the dining room to find Gregory in rare form, the champagne having loosened his tongue further. He was now fully committed to his impromptu lecture on gender roles in business. You see, gentlemen and ladies, he gestured broadly with his glass, nearly spilling its contents. Women like my Elena here don't have the killer instinct needed for high-stakes business. Right, darling? He winked at me as I took my seat. Tell them about that time you tried to understand our company's quarterly reports. I felt Amanda tense beside me, but I placed a subtle hand on her arm. Not yet. The timing had to be perfect. Oh, Gregory, I smiled, playing my part one last time. You know those numbers just confuse me. Exactly, Gregory practically shouted, pointing at me with his glass. Leave the business to those who understand it. My wife here is happiest planning galas and charity events. Isn't that right, sweetheart? Little did he know that those charity events had raised the capital for my first acquisition, or that the galas were carefully orchestrated networking opportunities where I connected with the industry leaders who now sat on my board. Gregory had never once attended what he called my little parties, never once asked what I actually did during the long hours when he was at the office. His assumption that I spent my days decorating our Beacon Hill brownstone and getting manicures had suited me perfectly, until now. As the dessert course arrived, a custom-made anniversary cake decorated with edible silver, I watched Gregory holding court, completely oblivious to the storm brewing around him. In less than 12 hours, he would discover that his company's mismanagement had finally caught up with him, that Vertex Industries was pulling all contracts effective immediately, and that the simple housewife he'd been mocking for years was actually E.J. Mitchell, the reclusive CEO whose technology conglomerate was about to acquire the remains of his failing company for pennies on the dollar. And in 6 months' time, after his inevitable financial collapse, I would offer him the only job his tarnished reputation could secure, an entry-level position in the mailroom of Mitchell Technology Partners, where he would finally learn what his simple housewife had built while he wasn't paying attention. The midnight sky stretched above us as Gregory and I left Le Crillon. He was still riding high on what he considered a successful anniversary dinner, completely oblivious to the discomfort he'd caused or the storm brewing on the horizon. The valet brought around our Tesla, a gift Gregory had given himself last year for bringing in the Vertex deal, and handed me the keys without asking, a tacit acknowledgement of my husband's inebriated state. That went perfectly, Gregory slurred, sliding into the passenger seat with a self-satisfied smile. Vertex is practically in my pocket now. Did you see how impressed Amanda was? I nodded non-committally as I navigated through Boston's historic streets, the cobblestones gleaming under streetlights. The city had been my home for nearly 20 years, ever since I arrived as a wide-eyed MIT undergraduate with nothing but ambition and a scholarship. Back then, I'd been Elena Jane Mitchell, the daughter of a Minnesota high school teacher and a nurse, determined to make my mark in the male-dominated world of technology. My mind drifted back to my early days building Mitchell Technology Partners from my tiny apartment in Cambridge. Those were long nights of coding, pitch decks, and ramen noodles, scraping together every dollar to fund my vision of creating adaptive software solutions for healthcare systems. By the time I met Gregory at a charity gala 8 years ago, I had already secured my first major client and a seed round of funding, though I was hardly the powerhouse I would become. The Chen guy seemed impressed too, Gregory continued, oblivious to my silence. Smart move inviting them to our anniversary dinner? Nothing says we're solid like showing off the perfect wife. he chuckled, patting my knee condescendingly. Though maybe next time wear the blue dress instead. The red was a bit attention-seeking. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel, remembering why I'd made the decision to keep my professional identity separate from my marriage. When we'd first met, Gregory had been charming and ambitious, a rising star at Harrington Solutions, the company his father had built. He'd seemed impressed by my intelligence, even as I downplayed my growing success, introducing myself simply as, Elena, I work in tech. It wasn't meant to become a permanent deception. In those early days, I'd intended to tell him the truth once we grew more serious. But then came the comments. Little things at first. His surprise when I offered an insightful opinion about market trends. His patronizing explanations of basic technology concepts I'd mastered years before. His jokes to friends about how I was smart for someone without an MBA. By the time he proposed 6 months later, I'd made my decision. Elena Harrington would be his wife, while E.J. Mitchell would continue building her empire separately. It seemed simpler that way, cleaner. Gregory got the supportive wife he wanted, and I maintained control of my growing company without having to navigate his fragile ego. Should we stop by your office? I asked quietly as we approached downtown. You mentioned some papers you needed to review before tomorrow. It was a calculated question. I knew exactly what waited at Harrington Solutions, the beginning of the end. Nah, Gregory waved dismissively. Nothing that can't wait until morning. The Vertex team is locked in. Next quarter's gonna be our biggest yet. He yawned widely. Besides, who works on their anniversary night? The irony wasn't lost on me. I had been working on our anniversary for weeks, orchestrating not just tonight's dinner, but tomorrow's dismantling of my husband's company. When I'd first acquired Vertex Industries through a series of shell companies and subsidiaries, 3 years ago, I hadn't planned to use my position to influence Gregory's business. My goal had been purely strategic. Vertex's healthcare integration systems paired perfectly with Mitchell Technologies' adaptive software solutions. The fact that they were also my husband's biggest client had been an unfortunate coincidence, one I'd managed carefully by installing Amanda as CEO and maintaining my distance from day-to-day operations. But over the past year, Gregory's leadership had become increasingly problematic. Reports from Amanda detailed ethical corners being cut, clients being overcharged, and toxic workplace practices that threatened everything Vertex stood for. I had given him chances to correct course, subtle suggestions over dinner, articles, stumbled upon and shared casually, even anonymous feedback through Vertex's communication channels. Nothing had changed. The final straw had come 3 months ago, when Gregory's team had implemented changes to Vertex's patient data systems without proper security protocols, potentially exposing sensitive medical information. The vulnerability had been caught and fixed before any breach occurred, but Gregory had covered it up rather than addressing the root causes. That night, as I listened to him boast about smoothing things over without anyone knowing, I'd made my decision. This wasn't just about an arrogant husband anymore. It was about protecting people's privacy and well-being. We pulled into the circular driveway of our Beacon Hill brownstone, the historic facade illuminated by tasteful landscape lighting ID had installed last spring. Unlike our home's classic exterior, the inside was thoroughly modern. Open concept spaces, smart home technology throughout, and my hidden office behind the library's sliding bookcase, straight out of a spy film. Gregory had laughed when I'd had it installed, calling it my little secret clubhouse where I could play with my charity spreadsheets. If only he knew that behind that hidden door, I'd orchestrated over a dozen major acquisitions, led board meetings with Fortune 500 executives, and built Mitchell Technology Partners into a $2.8 billion company with over 4,000 employees worldwide. Home, sweet home, Gregory mumbled as I helped him from the car. He leaned heavily on me as we walked up the front steps, the scent of expensive cologne and whiskey surrounding us. "You know, Elena, I'm really proud of you." I glanced at him, surprised by the sudden sentiment. "The dinner was perfect," he continued. "Everyone could see what a wonderful wife I have. So supportive, so uncomplicated." And there it was again, the backhanded compliment that reduced me to an accessory in his life. Uncomplicated, simple, just a housewife. Inside, I guided him up the stairs to our bedroom, helping him remove his suit and loosen his tie as he continued mumbling about the successful evening. "A perfect end to a perfect night," he said, falling back onto the king-sized bed. "And tomorrow's going to be even better. Vertex is going to renew their contract. Bigger than ever. I can feel it." I watched as he drifted off to sleep, oblivious to the fact that in less than 8 hours, Amanda Reeves would be delivering a very different message to Harrington Solutions. By this time tomorrow, the company his father had built would be in freefall, and the wife he'd dismissed as simple would be revealed as the powerhouse she'd always been. As Gregory began to snore softly, I slipped back downstairs and pressed my palm against the hidden scanner beside the library bookshelf. With a soft hydraulic hiss, the shelf slid aside, revealing my real world. A state-of-the-art office with multiple screens displaying real-time data from Mitchell Technologies operations across the globe. My COO, David, was waiting on the secure video link, his expression a mixture of anticipation and concern. "Everything set for tomorrow?" I asked, settling into my ergonomic chair. "All systems go," he confirmed. "Amanda has the termination paperwork ready. Our legal team is standing by. The press release announcing Mitchell Technologies' acquisition of Harrington's client portfolio goes live at 9 a.m. "And the reveal?" I asked, my finger tracing the edge of the desk. David hesitated. "Are you sure about this, Elena? We could keep your identity protected through the acquisition. No one needs to know that E.J. Mitchell is Gregory Harrington's wife." I considered this for a moment. The private part of me was tempted by this option, to simply be the anonymous force that acquired Gregory's failing company, to never have to see the recognition dawn in his eyes. But the part of me that had sat through countless dinners being dismissed as just a housewife demanded closure. "No," I said finally. "It's time for transparency. 8 years is long enough." David nodded, understanding in his eyes. He'd been with me since the beginning, one of the few people who knew both sides of my life. "For what it's worth," he said, "he's a fool who never deserved you." I smiled faintly. Perhaps. But I made my choices too. I straightened in my chair, shifting back into CEO mode. "Send me the final acquisition paperwork. I'll review it before morning." As the video link ended, I turned to the wall of windows overlooking Boston's twinkling skyline. The city that had watched me transform from a scholarship student to a tech mogul would now witness the final merging of my divided lives. By this time tomorrow, everyone, including my husband, would know that the simple housewife had built an empire while he wasn't looking. I allowed myself a small, satisfied smile. Let Gregory enjoy his last few hours of blissful ignorance. The morning would bring a reckoning 8 years in the making. Hey there, amazing viewers. I see you've been with me for these first few minutes, and I just want to take a quick moment to connect with you personally. If you're still watching, I know this story has touched something inside you. Maybe you've been underestimated too, or perhaps you've watched someone you care about be dismissed unfairly. Either way, I'm so grateful you're here with me. What you're about to witness isn't just a story about revenge or comeuppance. It's much deeper than that. It's about living in a world where people constantly place limitations on who you can be and what you can achieve. It's about the masks we wear to navigate difficult situations and the price we pay for hiding our true selves, even when we have good reasons for doing so. Elena's journey from simple housewife to revealed CEO is something many of us can relate to in different ways. How many times have you been in a room where someone made assumptions about your capabilities? How often have you bit your tongue because it was easier than challenging perceptions? And most importantly, how long have you waited for the moment when you could finally show your full potential? If you're connecting with this story, please hit that subscribe button right now. It costs you nothing, but means everything to this channel. Your support helps me bring these powerful stories to more people who need to hear them. Plus, when you subscribe, you'll never miss another video where we explore these complex human experiences together. I promise you, what's coming next in Elena's story will be worth every minute. We're about to witness not just the fall of an arrogant man, but the emergence of a woman who refused to be limited by someone else's perception of her. The journey ahead contains moments that will make you cheer, moments that might make you reflect on your own life, and ultimately, an ending that I believe will leave you thinking long after this video ends. So grab a drink, get comfortable, and join me as we continue this exploration of power, perception, and the quiet strength it takes to play the long game when everyone underestimates you. Because trust me, the moment when Gregory realizes who his simple housewife really is, it's absolutely priceless. Now let's get back to our story. I left you just as Elena was making her final preparations for the day that would change everything. The library was silent, except for the soft hum of my computers and the occasional ping of incoming secure messages. Outside my hidden office, the brownstone sat quiet and dark, Gregory's snores faintly audible from upstairs. It was nearly 2 a.m., but sleep was the furthest thing from my mind. On my primary screen, I reviewed the press release one final time. Mitchell Technology Partners acquires Harrington Solutions, client portfolio. Boston, MA, Mitchell Technology. Partners, MTP, announced today the acquisition of the complete client portfolio from Harrington Solutions, including the transfer of all contracts with Vertex Industries and its subsidiaries. The acquisition follows documented concerns regarding Harrington's business practices and technical implementations. This transition ensures continuity of service while addressing serious concerns about data security and ethical business conduct, said MTP Chief Executive Officer E.J. Mitchell. All client services will continue uninterrupted under enhanced protocols and oversight. In a related announcement, MTP revealed that CEO E.J. Mitchell is, in fact, Elena Jane Harrington, née Mitchell, wife of Harrington Solutions founder Gregory Harrington, who has operated under her professional name throughout her career. While this disclosure may come as a surprise to many, the separation of my professional and personal identities was a deliberate choice made years ago for both business and personal reasons, Mitchell stated. Recent events have made this separation no longer tenable or in the best interest of our clients and employees. Mitchell Technology Partners, founded in 2008, has grown to become a leading provider of adaptive software solutions for the healthcare industry, with annual revenues exceeding $2.8 billion. I paused, my finger hovering over the trackpad. This single document would irreversibly transform my life. Once sent, there would be no going back to the carefully compartmentalized existence I'd maintained for 8 years. The press, the industry, even our friends would all see the complete picture for the first time. The simple housewife who was actually running one of Boston's most successful technology companies. My phone buzzed with a text from Amanda. Final board approval secured. Legal team has reviewed everything. We're ready when you are. I typed a quick response. Proceeding as planned. 9 a.m. With a deep breath, I sent the press release to our communications team with instructions for morning distribution. Then I opened my personal email and began a different, more difficult message. Dear Gregory, by the time you read this, you will have already begun to understand that I am not who you thought I was. Or perhaps, more accurately, I am much more than who you believed me to be. For 8 years, you have known me as Elena Harrington, your wife who plans dinner parties and charity events. Today, you will learn that I am also E.J. Mitchell, founder and CEO of Mitchell Technology Partners. This was never meant to be a deception. When we first met, I was already building my company, already finding success in the very field you repeatedly told me I couldn't possibly understand. Your dismissal of my capabilities began so early in our relationship that I made a choice to keep my professional life separate rather than constantly battle your preconceptions. Perhaps that was a mistake. Perhaps I should have challenged you from the beginning, should have insisted you see me clearly. But relationships are complicated, and the path of least resistance sometimes seems the wisest choice in the moment. What you will learn today about Vertex Industries, about the acquisition of Harrington Solutions' client portfolio, about the company I've built while you were busy dismissing me as uncomplicated, none of this was done lightly or with the primary purpose of hurting you. These were business decisions made necessary by your own actions and the increasingly concerning direction of your company. I won't pretend there isn't a certain poetic justice in the timing. Last night at dinner, as you raised your glass to toast your simple housewife, I knew it would be the last time I would sit quietly while you underestimated me to my face. We have much to discuss, and I'm certain you will have many questions. I am prepared to answer them all. But first, you will need to understand that everything is changing, beginning this morning. For what it's worth, I did love you. Part of me still does. But I have also spent 8 years shrinking myself to fit your perception, and that ends today. Elena. I stared at the screen, reading and rereading the words. Then I saved the draft. This wasn't something to send electronically. When the time came, we would have this conversation face to face. Gregory deserved that much, despite everything. Closing my laptop, I settled back in my chair and finally allowed the enormity of what was coming to wash over me. Tomorrow, the carefully constructed walls between my two lives would come crashing down. The business world would have their dramatic story of the secret CEO, and the gossip columns would feast on the personal angle. Our friends would be shocked, our families dismayed by the deception. There would be those who judged me for the division I'd created, and others who criticized me for ending it so publicly. Was I ready for all of that? A memory surfaced from last year's Christmas party at the Andersons. Gregory, 3 whiskeys. Loudly explaining to the gathered guests why women generally struggled with strategic thinking. My Elena's the perfect example, he'd said, wrapping an arm around my shoulders. Brilliant at organizing a dinner party, but ask her about business. Strategy and her eyes glaze over. It's just not how the female mind works. I'd smiled tightly as our friends had shifted uncomfortably. Later that night, while Gregory slept, I'd finalized the acquisition of a healthcare AI startup that expanded Mitchell Technologies' capabilities into 3 new markets. Yes, I was ready. More than ready. I glanced at the time, 2:47 a.m. In just over 6 hours, Gregory would walk into his office at Harrington Solutions to find Amanda Reeves and the Vertex legal team waiting with termination paperwork. By 9 a.m., the press release would hit the newswires. By noon, the entire business community would know that E.J. Mitchell, the notoriously private CEO who rarely appeared in public, was Gregory Harrington's simple housewife. I should try to sleep, I thought, even as I knew rest would be impossible. Tomorrow would require all my strength, all my focus. The merging of my 2 lives would demand nothing less than my full capacity to navigate its complexity. As I finally left my hidden office, sliding the bookshelf closed behind me, I paused to look around our immaculate living room. The space had been featured twice in Boston Home Magazine, the perfect showcase of Elena Harrington's impeccable taste and attention to detail. How many business associates had Gregory entertained here, never realizing that the woman serving drinks and facilitating conversation was the same E.J. Mitchell whose company they desperately wanted to partner with? Tomorrow, everyone would know. Tomorrow, I would finally be whole. I climbed the stairs quietly, slipped into the guest bedroom rather than disturbing Gregory, and lay awake watching the ceiling, waiting for the dawn that would change everything. Fat Chew. First hints of dawn were breaking over Boston's skyline when I finally gave up on sleep. After a quick shower, I dressed with deliberate care, selecting a tailored charcoal pantsuit I'd never worn in Gregory's presence, paired with the Louboutins he'd given me last Christmas. "So you can look pretty for my business dinners," he'd said when I opened them. Today, they would carry me into a very different kind of business meeting. As I applied my makeup, subtle but polished, CEO appropriate rather than supportive wife, I heard Gregory stirring in our bedroom. Right on schedule, his morning routine was as predictable as his dismissive comments. Shower, coffee, financial news, out the door by 7:30. Except today would unfold very differently. I made my way downstairs and started the coffee maker. The familiar domestic ritual felt strangely performative now, knowing it was one of the last acts I would perform as simply Gregory's wife. I checked my secure phone. 5 messages from my executive team confirming all systems were go for. 9 a.m. "Morning," Gregory mumbled as he entered the kitchen, hair still damp from his shower. He moved directly to the coffee machine, pouring himself a cup without offering me one. A small daily reminder of my place in his universe. "Head's killing." Me. "Did I overdo it last night?" "Just a bit," I replied, keeping my voice neutral. The Vertex team seemed impressed. He grinned, missing my careful tone entirely. "Damn right they were. Another year of contracts in the bag. I can feel it." He glanced at my outfit, frowning slightly. "Why are you so dressed up? One of your charity luncheons today?" This was exactly the pattern we'd established over 8 years. His assumption that my activities were trivial, my quiet acceptance of his perception. How many times had this exact exchange played out in our kitchen? "Something like that," I answered, sipping my own coffee. "Board meeting for the Mitchell Foundation." The irony of using my actual company name sailed right past him, as I'd known. It would. Gregory had never once questioned the name of my charitable organization. Never once made the connection to Mitchell Technology Partners. Why would he? In his mind, his wife couldn't possibly be running anything significant. "Well, try not to pledge too much of my money away," he joked, the same tired joke he made whenever I mentioned my foundation work. After the Vertex renewal, we should be in for a huge quarter, but still, keep it reasonable. I thought of my company's $2.8 billion valuation, of my personal net worth that dwarfed his, of the fact that I had been secretly paying off the mortgage on our brownstone for the past 3 years as his company's finances deteriorated. "I'll be careful," I assured him with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. Gregory checked his watch, the vintage Patek Philippe I'd given him for his birthday last year. "Gotta run. Early meeting with the team before the Vertex call." He drained his coffee cup and set it in the sink rather than the dishwasher. Another small daily display of his expectations about domestic roles. He leaned in for his perfunctory goodbye kiss. "Don't wait up tonight. If the Vertex deal goes through as expected, the boys and I are going to celebrate." Boys, always boys. Despite the fact that his executive team included 3 women, including his CFO, he persistently referred to his colleagues as the boys. It was one of the first things that had given me pause about his character back when we were dating. I should have paid more attention to that red flag. "Good luck today," I said, meaning it sincerely. He would need more than luck, but there was no point in warning him now. The front door closed behind him, and I allowed myself a moment of stillness in our kitchen. 8 years of mornings like this one, of subtle dismissals, of belittling comments, of assumptions about my capabilities. 8 years of smiling and nodding while my husband explained basic concepts I'd mastered years before he'd even heard of them. 8 years of just a housewife when I was running board meetings and closing million-dollar deals before he even woke up. My phone buzzed with a text from Amanda. "He just called to confirm our 9 a.m. Still has no idea. Are you sure you don't? Want to be here for this? I typed back. No. You handle the contract termination. I'll see him afterward. It would be more merciful that way. Let Amanda deliver the business blow first, the loss of Vertex Industries, his largest client. Let him process that professional catastrophe before facing the personal revelation that his wife was behind it all. Even now, after everything, I wanted to spare him what public humiliation I could. I moved to my hidden office, activated the security protocols, and settled in for the most consequential morning of my professional life. On one monitor, I could see the Mitchell Technology Partners headquarters downtown, already buzzing with activity as my team prepared for the press announcement. On another screen, a secure feed showed the Harrington Solutions lobby, where Amanda, Reeves and her legal team were now arriving, well ahead of the 9 a.m. meeting. A third alert popped up, a text from Sophie, my personal assistant who Gregory believed was my shopping friend. Press packets ready. News embargo lifts at 9:15 a.m. Bloomberg and CNBC requesting interviews after the announcement. How do you want to handle? I considered for a moment. The business world had speculated for years about the mysterious E.J. Mitchell, who rarely appeared in public and never gave interviews. The revelation of my identity would create a media frenzy regardless of how I handled it. Schedule Bloomberg for 11 a.m. virtual. No other interviews today. We'll reassess tomorrow. As I sent the message, I thought about the first time Gregory had dismissed my business acumen publicly. We'd been dating for just 3 months, attending a dinner with his colleagues. Someone had asked about my background, and I'd mentioned my computer science degree from MIT. Elena's being modest, Gregory had laughed, squeezing my shoulder. She took a few classes, but she's really more of a people person than a tech person. Aren't you, darling? I'd been so shocked I hadn't corrected him. I'd graduated summa cum laude with a double major in computer science and business, followed by a master's in artificial intelligence. By then, I was already running a promising startup with seed funding, but something in his confident dismissal had silenced me, making me wonder if challenging him would seem petty or confrontational. That night had established the pattern we'd followed ever since. His automatic diminishment of my capabilities, my quiet acceptance rather than creating conflict. Each time it happened, it became harder to correct without addressing why I'd stayed silent before. 2 years into our marriage, at another corporate dinner, a colleague had asked about my thoughts on blockchain technology. Before I could answer, Gregory had jumped in. Oh, Elena wouldn't know about that. She can barely set the DVR, isn't that right, sweetheart? Now, if you want to know about the best caterers in Boston, she's your expert. The table had laughed, and I'd smiled tightly, even as I was in the middle of implementing blockchain solutions for medical records at Mitchell Technology. By then, the pattern was firmly established. Gregory as the knowledgeable businessman, me as the decorative domestic wife. The hospital gala, 3 years ago. Elena's charity work is cute, but it's really just planning parties with her ladies who lunch. Right, darling? This, while my foundation was funding breakthrough research in patient data systems, the neighborhood cookout last summer. Don't ask Elena about investments. She thinks a good return is finding a dress on sale. Isn't that right, honey? This, while I was orchestrating a $400 million acquisition of a medical AI company. Last night's anniversary dinner had simply been the culmination of 8 years of similar moments, a constant, steady stream of dismissal and diminishment that had finally reached its breaking point. Not because I needed his validation, I'd long since stopped seeking that, but because his poor business practices were now threatening the welfare of patients whose data his company handled. My secure line rang. David, my COO, was calling. Teams are in position, he reported. Legal is with Amanda at Harrington. PR is standing by. The board is assembled in the conference room awaiting your virtual address at 8:45. I checked the time, 7:52 a.m. In just over an hour, the business world would be rocked by the revelation of E.J. Mitchell's true identity, and my husband would learn that his simple housewife had been running circles around him professionally for our entire relationship. "I'll be online for the board at 8:45, I confirmed. "And David, thank you for everything, for keeping my secret all these years." "It's been an honor," he said simply. "And for what it's worth, I think today is long overdue." As I ended the call, I couldn't help but agree. 8 years of division, of being Elena at home and EJ at work, had taken its toll. Whatever came next would be challenging, messy, probably painful. But at least it would be honest. My screens showed Gregory arriving at Harrington Solutions, straightening his tie as he entered the building, blissfully unaware that in exactly 1 hour, both his business and his marriage would be transformed forever. 15 a.m. The quiet hum of my hidden office was interrupted by an unexpected sound, my personal phone ringing with Gregory's ringtone. I hesitated before answering, watching my office monitors where Amanda and her legal team were already setting up in the Harrington Solutions conference room. Gregory wasn't scheduled to meet them for another 45 minutes. Why was he calling now? Hello? I kept my voice neutral, the same tone I'd perfected as the supportive wife. "Elena, thank God you answered." Gregory's voice had an edge I hadn't heard before, tense, almost panicked. "Something strange is happening at the office." I took a careful breath. "What do you mean?" "Amanda Reeves is here with Vertex's entire legal team. They've requested an emergency meeting and won't tell my assistant what it's about." The confusion in his voice was palpable. "And Michael Chen just called to say he can't make our contract renewal discussion because he has a conflicting meeting at, get this, Mitchell Technology Partners." The first crack in his reality. I watched on my monitor as Gregory paced in his office, phone to his ear, free hand running through his hair in agitation. "That sounds unusual," I offered, keeping my voice steady. "When is your meeting with Amanda?" "That's just it. It wasn't scheduled until 9, but they showed up at 8, demanding to see me immediately. And now my assistant says there are rumors that Vertex is pulling all their contracts." There was a slight tremor in his voice now, the first hint of fear. "Elena, this is our biggest client. If there's any truth to this—" "Gregory," I interrupted gently, "I'm sure there's an explanation. Why don't you meet with Amanda and find out what's happening before jumping to conclusions?" Through the monitor, I could see him nodding, drawing himself up as if preparing for battle, the confident businessman persona sliding back into place. "You're right, of course. It's probably just a miscommunication or negotiation tactic." He paused. "I should go. I'll call you later once this is sorted out." "Good luck," I said again, meaning it perhaps more sincerely than I had earlier. As I ended the call, my executive line immediately rang. "Amanda." "He's insisting on meeting now," she reported. "He seems agitated, saying he received information that we're terminating contracts." "Proceed as planned," I instructed. "I'll handle any fallout after you've delivered the official termination." The wheels were in motion now, events accelerating beyond anyone's ability to stop them. On my calendar, the board meeting loomed at 8:45, just 25 minutes away. The press release was cued for 9:15. Gregory's world was about to change irrevocably, and while I had orchestrated it all, I found no joy in watching his mounting confusion. My personal phone buzzed with a text, not from Gregory this time, but from Diane Harrington, his mother. My stomach tightened as I read her message. "Elena, dear, is everything all right? Gregory just called Robert sounding very upset about something at work, said it might be serious." Robert, Gregory's father and founder of Harrington Solutions, had retired 5 years ago, handing the company to his son with proud declarations about the next generation of Harrington leadership. He'd been a good mentor to Gregory in many ways, but had also instilled in him that unshakable confidence that sometimes crossed into arrogance. I stared at Diane's message, unsure how to respond. In less than an hour, she and Robert would learn that their daughter-in-law, the woman they'd welcomed into their family, whose little charity work they'd patronizingly praised at holiday gatherings, had been secretly running one of Boston's most successful technology companies. That same daughter-in-law was now about to acquire the remains of their family business after terminating its largest client relationship. There was no gentle way to prepare them for that revelation. "Everything's fine," I typed back, the necessary lie sitting uncomfortably in my chest. "I think there may be some business challenges today. I'll have Gregory call you later." As I sent the message, another alert flashed across my screen. A news notification from Boston Business Journal. Breaking. Rumors of major client loss at Harrington Solutions send stock tumbling in pre-market trading. It was starting already. The financial markets, with their relentless efficiency, had caught wind of the coming announcement. Harrington's stock was already down 8% in pre-market trading on nothing but rumors. By the end of the day, after the official announcement that Vertex Industries, representing nearly 40% of Harrington's annual revenue, was terminating all contracts, the stock would likely lose half its value or more. I felt a pang of regret, not for Gregory, but for the Harrington employees who would be caught in the crossfire. My acquisition plan included provisions to hire many of them at Mitchell Technology, but the transition would still be difficult for people who had done nothing wrong except work for a poorly managed company. My secure line rang again. David. With final confirmation that the board was assembled and waiting. 8:42 a.m. 3 minutes until I would officially brief my board on the acquisition and my personal revelation. 15 minutes until Gregory would receive formal notification that Vertex was terminating all contracts. 33 minutes until the press release that would change everything. I straightened my jacket, checked my appearance one last time, and activated the secure video link to Mitchell Technology's conference room. The familiar faces of my board members appeared on screen, 12 men and women who had helped build the company from its earliest days, most of whom had never known about my double life. "Good morning," I began, my voice calm despite the storm of emotions beneath the surface. "Thank you for meeting on such short notice. Today marks a significant transition for Mitchell Technology Partners, both in terms of business operations and personal disclosure." I paused, looking at these people who had trusted me as their leader for over a decade, who had respected my privacy and my unorthodox approach to leadership. As you know, we are finalizing the acquisition of Harrington Solutions' client portfolio following the termination of their contracts with Vertex Industries. What you don't know, what almost no one knows, is that Gregory Harrington, the CEO of Harrington Solutions, is my husband. The stunned silence on the video was exactly what I had expected. Even those few board members who knew I was married had never been told my husband's name, and I had always attended functions alone, citing my spouse's busy schedule. For the past 8 years, I have maintained complete separation between my personal and professional lives. Gregory has never known that I am E.J. Mitchell. He believes I run a small charitable foundation. Martin Friedman, our longest-serving board member, found his voice first. "Elena, E.J., are you saying your husband has no idea you run a multi-billion-dollar technology company?" "That's correct," I confirmed. It was a decision made early in our relationship, one that became increasingly difficult to reverse as time went on. Today, that separation ends. At 9:15, we will issue a press release announcing both the acquisition and my true identity. The questions came rapidly then. Concerns about market reaction, about legal implications, about the personal fallout I would face. I answered each one with the same composed efficiency I'd always brought to board meetings. Though inside, a clock was ticking down toward the moment my carefully constructed world would shatter. At 8:57, while still briefing the board, I saw movement on one of my monitors. Gregory, emerging from his office at Harrington Solutions, face ashen, Amanda and the legal team following behind. The meeting had concluded early. The termination was official. "I need to cut this short," I told the board, watching Gregory's stunned expression as he walked woodenly toward the elevator. "The situation is developing more quickly than anticipated. I'll reconnect after the press release." As I ended the video call, my personal phone exploded with notifications. 3 missed calls from Gregory, 2 from his father Robert, and a flurry of increasingly frantic text messages. Gregory, 8:53 a.m. "Elena, call me immediately. Emergency." Gregory, 8:55 a.m. "Vertex is terminating all contracts, effective immediately. This is a disaster." Gregory, 8:56 a.m. "They're saying something about being acquired by Mitchell Technology. Do you know anything about this foundation of yours?" The last message made my breath catch. The dots were so close to connecting in his mind, yet still just beyond his grasp. Mitchell Foundation, Mitchell Technology. The similarity that had been hiding in plain sight all these years. My office phone rang, the private line that only 5 people had access to. The caller ID showed it was Amanda. "It's done," she said without preamble. "All contracts formally terminated." He didn't take it well. "Details?" I asked, watching on the monitor as Gregory's car pulled out of the Harrington Solutions parking garage, moving at a speed that concerned me. He was shocked, then angry, then tried to negotiate. When I made it clear this wasn't a negotiation, he demanded to know who at Mitchell Technology had authorized this. I told him he would be hearing from Mitchell's CEO directly. I glanced at the time. 9:04 a.m. The press release would go live in 11 minutes. "Where is he headed now?" he said, and I quote, "I'm going home to talk to my wife. She runs some foundation connected to Mitchell." "Elena, I think he's starting to put it together." A cold certainty settled over me. Gregory was coming home. Coming here, right now, his world collapsing around him, grasping at the fragile connection between my supposed foundation and the company destroying his business. In his desperation, he was finally seeing what had been in front of him for 8 years. "How far out is he?" I asked, already moving to deactivate my hidden office. "Left about 5 minutes ago, driving like a maniac." Our home was normally a 15-minute drive from Harrington Solutions, but at the speed Gregory was likely traveling. "I need to prepare. The press release goes out in 10 minutes. Make sure everything proceeds as planned." I ended the call and quickly shut down my systems, the hidden door sliding silently closed behind me as I stepped into the main house. Through the front windows, I could see Gregory's car screeching to a halt in our driveway. The moment of truth had arrived far sooner than I'd anticipated. The front door burst open. "Elena!" Gregory's voice echoed through our home, desperate and disbelieving. "Elena, where are you?" I straightened my shoulders and stepped into the foyer to face my husband. "I'm right here, Gregory." Gregory stood in our foyer, his normally immaculate appearance in disarray. Tie loosened, hair disheveled, face flushed with a combination of panic and rage. His eyes darted wildly around the room before settling on me with an intensity that might have frightened me if I hadn't been preparing for this moment for so long. "What the hell is happening?" he demanded, advancing toward me. "Vertex just terminated. All their contracts, millions in revenue, gone. And they're saying they've been acquired by Mitchell Technology Partners." His voice rose with each word. "The Mitchell Foundation, your charity. What's the connection?" I remained perfectly still, maintaining eye contact. "It's not a charity, Gregory. It never was." He stopped a few feet away from me, confusion momentarily overtaking his anger. "What are you talking about? Your foundation, the galas, the fundraisers." "Business meetings," I corrected calmly. "Networking events, strategy sessions with investors and industry leaders." His brow furrowed as he struggled to process my words. "I don't understand." "The Mitchell Foundation doesn't exist, Gregory. It never did. I am the CEO of Mitchell Technology Partners. I have been since I founded the company, 15 years ago. The seconds of silence that followed seemed to stretch into eternity. I watched the emotions play across his face. Confusion, disbelief, dawning comprehension, and finally, a return to anger, deeper than before. "That's ridiculous," he scoffed, but the uncertainty in his voice betrayed him. "Mitchell Technology is run by E.J. Mitchell. Everyone knows that." "E.J. Mitchell," I said quietly. "Elena Jane Mitchell. My name before we married. The name I continued to use professionally." Gregory staggered backward as if physically struck, grabbing the entryway. Table for support? A vase of fresh flowers, which I'd arranged just yesterday in my role as perfect housewife, toppled and shattered on the marble floor. "No," he whispered, shaking his head. "That's impossible. You're just a simple housewife?" I finished for him, echoing his words from last night's dinner. "That's what you told Amanda Reeves and the entire Vertex team, wasn't it? That I wouldn't understand complex business matters? That I was better suited to planning dinner parties?" His face paled. "Elena, I didn't mean—" "You meant every word." I cut him off, my voice still controlled but carrying an edge now. "Just like you meant it when you told the Wilsons I couldn't understand investment strategies. Just like you meant it when you told your father I was decorative but not too bright. Just like you meant it every single time you've dismissed me, diminished me, or explained basic concepts to me that I've mastered far more thoroughly than you ever will." Gregory's shock was transitioning rapidly back to anger, the response I'd anticipated. He'd never been able to handle feeling outmaneuvered or outsmarted, particularly by a woman. So this whole thing, our entire marriage, has been some kind of elaborate lie? His voice rose again, echoing off the high ceilings. "Some sick game where you pretended to be something you're not?" "No, Gregory. I simply allowed you to see what you expected to see. You decided on our third date that I couldn't possibly understand. Technology or business at your level, despite my MIT degrees hanging in plain sight in my apartment. You created the narrative of the supportive, simple wife, and I chose not to correct you." "For 8 years?" he shouted, slamming his hand down on the table, sending a stack of design magazines cascading to the floor. "You've been lying to me for 8 years?" I remained perfectly still, refusing to be baited into matching his emotional escalation. "I never lied about who I was. I simply didn't correct your assumptions." "Semantics," he spat. "You've been running a multi-billion-dollar company behind my back while pretending to be nothing more than a housewife and charity organizer." The irony of his outrage wasn't lost on me. For years, he'd benefited from believing his wife was simple. It had fed his ego, confirmed his worldview, allowed him to play the role of the superior partner. Now that the truth threatened that narrative, he was casting me as the villain. And, "Now what? You've engineered the destruction of my company?" His voice turned cold. "Vertex was our biggest client. Without those contracts, Harrington Solutions will collapse." "I didn't engineer the destruction of your company, Gregory. Your own mismanagement and ethical shortcuts did that." I moved to the living room window, looking out at the garden I'd carefully tended as part of my housewife persona. The security breach with patient data 3 months ago should have been disclosed. The overcharging on implementation hours should have been corrected. The hostile work environment complaints should have been addressed. His face contorted with rage. "You were spying on me? Having your people report back on my company's operations?" "No, spying was necessary," I replied evenly. "It's called due diligence. Vertex Industries has been a Mitchell Technology subsidiary for 3 years. Every report, every complaint, every breach came through proper channels to my desk." The color drained from his face again. 3 years? You've owned Vertex for 3 years? My biggest client has been reporting to my wife this entire time? I nodded. Amanda Reeves reports directly to me. She has since I appointed her CEO after the acquisition. Gregory's hands clenched into fists at his sides, his breathing becoming rapid and shallow. 8 years of believing himself superior to his wife were crumbling in real time, and he was not handling the revelation with grace. "So last night," he said through gritted teeth, "when you sat there at our anniversary dinner, letting me toast to my simple housewife in front of Amanda Reeves and Michael Chen, they knew? Everyone at that table knew except me?" "Yes," I admitted. "They knew." The clock on the mantel struck 9:15. Right on schedule, my phone buzzed with a notification. The press release was now public. Within seconds, Gregory's phone began ringing, incessantly. He pulled it from his pocket, glanced at the screen, and then looked back at me with growing horror. "What have you done?" he whispered. "The press release has just gone out," I explained. "It announces Mitchell Technologies' acquisition of Harrington Solutions' client portfolio and reveals my identity as E.J. Mitchell." His phone continued buzzing, with calls and notifications, but he made no move to answer it. Instead, he stared at me as if seeing a stranger. "Why now?" he asked, his voice hoarse. "After 8 years of this charade, why blow everything up now?" "Because it became necessary," I said simply. "Your company's deteriorating practices were putting patient data at risk. The ethical shortcuts were threatening the reputation of the entire network. And frankly, Gregory, I grew tired of being dismissed as just a housewife by the man who should have seen me most clearly." He barked a harsh laugh. "So this is revenge? For not appreciating you enough? For not recognizing your secret brilliance?" "This is business," I corrected him. "The personal satisfaction is merely incidental." His face darkened as he advanced toward me again. "You've destroyed everything. My company, my reputation, Your company was already failing," I interrupted. "Your reputation was already compromised among those who matter in this industry. And our marriage—" I trailed off, unwilling to put into words what we both now knew. Gregory's phone rang again, his father's ringtone. This time he glanced at it but still didn't answer. "They all know, don't they?" he said quietly, a new note of desperation in his voice. "My parents, our friends, everyone in the industry, they all know that my wife has been secretly running circles around me for years. They know that E.J. Mitchell and Elena Harrington are the same person," I confirmed. "The rest is interpretation." His laugh was brittle. "Interpretation? There's only one way to interpret this, Elena. You've humiliated me. Deliberately, publicly, completely." The accusation hung in the air between us. In his mind, this was the heart of the matter. Not his years of dismissive behavior, not his company's ethical lapses, not the patient data put at risk by his corner cutting, but the damage to his pride. "I never wanted to humiliate you, Gregory. I simply reached a point where maintaining the division between my two lives became untenable. The company, my company, needed me to act with complete transparency." "Your company," he spat. "Always. Your precious company. And what about us? What about our marriage? Did that ever mean anything to you? Or was I just some convenient cover for your secret CEO identity?" The question struck deeper than I'd expected, touching on doubts I'd harbored myself during our years together. Had I married Gregory because I loved him, or because his assumptions about me had provided the perfect cover for my private professional life? Had I stayed because I cared for him, or because the division had become too complicated to untangle? "I loved you," I said finally, the past tense unavoidable now. "But I also allowed you to see only what you wanted to see. That's not a foundation for a real partnership." Gregory's phone buzzed again, a text this time. He glanced at it, and his expression changed, a new tension tightening his features. "The board is calling an emergency meeting," he said, his voice suddenly hollow. "They want me there in 30 minutes to discuss the Vertex situation and Mitchell Technology acquisition." He looked up at me. anger giving way to grim realization. I'm about to be fired from my own company, aren't I? I didn't answer. We both knew the truth. While you, he continued bitterly, will be celebrated as the brilliant, secretive CEO who built a technology empire while her clueless husband dismissed her as just a housewife. The perfect feminist revenge story. This isn't about revenge, I repeated, though the word sounded hollow even to me. Wasn't there at least a part of me that had savored the thought of this moment? The recognition dawning in his eyes, the realization of just how completely he had underestimated me. Gregory straightened his tie and smoothed his hair, attempting to reassemble his dignity. I have to go face the board. We'll finish this discussion later. As he turned toward the door, his phone buzzed one more time. He checked it, and a bitter smile twisted his lips. Boston Business Journal wants a comment on how it feels to discover your wife is secretly E.J. Mitchell, he read aloud. And that she's just acquired your client portfolio right out from under you. He looked up at me, eyes cold. Any suggestions on how I should respond? Tell them the truth, I said quietly. That you never bothered to look beyond your own assumptions. He stared at me for a long moment, then turned and walked out the door without another word. Through the window, I watched him get into his car and drive away, shoulders rigid with anger and humiliation. My phone lit up with a call from David. It's done, he said when I answered. The press release is live. Your inbox is exploding with interview requests. How did it go with Gregory? I watched my husband's car disappear around the corner, taking with it 8 years of pretense and compromise. About as expected, I replied. And this is just the beginning. As Gregory's car disappeared from view, I allowed myself a moment of stillness in the quiet of our home, a home that suddenly felt like a stage set where I'd been performing a role for 8 years. The broken vase in the foyer, the scattered magazines on the floor, the lingering tension in the air, all evidence of the scene that had just played out, the first honest interaction between my husband and me perhaps in our entire marriage. My phone continued to buzz with notifications, but I silenced it and moved toward the library. My hand hovered over the hidden scanner that would reveal my secret office. After a moment's hesitation, I pressed my palm against it, no longer concerned about hiding. The bookshelf slid open smoothly, revealing the command center from which I'd built and run Mitchell Technology Partners while maintaining the fiction of being just a housewife. Inside, my monitors displayed the immediate aftermath of the press release. Mitchell Technology's stock was up 4.2% on news of the acquisition. Harrington Solutions had been halted after falling 27% in the first 15 minutes of trading. News outlets were running with headlines ranging from the business-like, Mitchell Technology acquires Harrington client portfolio, CEO reveals identity, to the sensational, Tech's mystery woman unveils secret identity as husband's company collapses. I settled into my chair, taking a deep breath before activating the secure video link to Mitchell Technology headquarters. David's face appeared on screen, relief evident in his expression when he saw me. There you are. Are you all right? I'm fine, I assured him, though the emotional toll of the confrontation with Gregory was still reverberating through me. How are things there? Controlled chaos, he admitted with a small smile. The press is camped outside the building. Social media is exploding with the news. The board has released their statement of full support. And he hesitated. Harrington Solutions board just voted to remove Gregory as CEO, effective immediately. That had happened faster than even I had anticipated. They've already met? Emergency virtual session. It was unanimous. David's expression turned concerned. What will you do now? About Gregory, I mean. It was the question I'd been avoiding since setting this plan in motion. What did I want for my husband in the aftermath of this revelation? Divorce seemed inevitable. Our marriage had been built on a foundation of deception and dismissal that couldn't be salvaged, but beyond that? I don't know yet, I admitted. Let's focus on business first. How's the integration team doing with the Harrington client transition? For the next hour, I immersed myself in the familiar comfort of business operations, reviewing integration plans, approving communications to former Harrington clients, and preparing for the Bloomberg interview I'd agreed to give at 11 a.m. Throughout, one screen remained dedicated to financial news coverage, where analysts were dissecting every aspect of the revelation. A stunning disclosure that E.J. Mitchell, long considered one of the most private and mysterious CEOs in tech, is actually Elena Harrington, wife of Gregory Harrington, whose company just lost its largest client to Mitchell Technology. Raises questions about potential insider information and conflicts of interest, though legal experts we've spoken to suggest that Mitchell's ownership of Vertex Industries was properly disclosed in SEC filings, even if her personal connection to Harrington was not. Sources close to Harrington Solutions describe Gregory Harrington as completely blindsided by the revelation that his wife has secretly been running a multi-billion-dollar technology company throughout their 8-year marriage. I muted the coverage as another call came through. Amanda Reeves. Congratulations, she said when I answered. Though that seems like the wrong word for the occasion. Thank you anyway, I replied. How are things at Vertex? Stable. The team is relieved, actually. No one enjoyed watching Harrington's corner-cutting compromise our standards. And speaking of Harrington, she paused. I've just come from their offices. The board asked me to attend their emergency session as Vertex's representative. How bad was it? I couldn't help asking, a part of me still concerned for Gregory despite everything. About what you'd expect. He tried to blame the contract termination on personal vendettas, accused you of corporate espionage. When that didn't work, he suggested, the board sue Mitchell Technology for, I believe the phrase was matrimonial interference in business affairs. I winced. That sounded like Gregory, unable to accept responsibility, looking for someone else to blame. And the board? Not receptive. They've reviewed the documentation of the security breaches, the overcharging, the employee complaints. They know exactly why Vertex terminated the contracts. Amanda's voice softened slightly. For what it's worth, I don't think many people are buying his victim narrative. The business community respects what you've built at Mitchell Technology. After ending the call with Amanda, I returned to my preparations for the Bloomberg interview. This would be my first public appearance as E.J. Mitchell, the first time I would openly connect my two identities for the world to see. The questions would be difficult, personal, probably uncomfortable, but necessary for establishing the narrative I wanted to control. As I reviewed potential talking points, my thoughts drifted to how this had all begun, to the pivotal decision I'd made 8 years ago to maintain my separate professional identity after meeting Gregory. So, what exactly do you do in tech? Gregory asked, refilling my wine glass as we sat in the corner of the upscale restaurant where we were having our third date. His tone was casual, but I detected the faint note of condescension I'd begun to notice whenever the conversation turned to my career. I hesitated, running my finger along the stem of the glass. The truth was simple enough. I was E.J. Mitchell, founder and CEO of Mitchell Technology, a rapidly growing healthcare software company that had just secured its Series B funding. But something made me pause. Perhaps the way he'd explained cloud computing to me on our first date, incorrectly, I might add, or how he'd dismissed a female tech CEO in passing conversation on our second date as probably just a figurehead. I work with healthcare data systems, I said finally, the deliberate vagueness feeling strange on my tongue. I'd never hidden my accomplishments before. Like a programmer? He asked, his expression suggesting he was trying to be impressed by something he considered rather mundane. Another hesitation. Another choice. I work on the business side, I said, which was true enough. Ah. He nodded knowingly, relief evident in his expression. Administration. That makes more sense. You don't have the intensity I associate with hardcore tech people. I should have corrected him then. Should have told him that, actually. I had double majored in computer science and business at MIT, that I'd written the initial code for my company's platform myself, that I was currently leading a team of 30 hardcore tech people who respected both my technical and business acumen. Instead, I smiled and changed the subject, asking about his recent sailing trip. His face lit up as he launched into a detailed account, clearly more comfortable discussing his hobbies than my career. Later that night, as he walked me to my door, he asked about a framed certificate hanging in my entryway, my MIT diploma, clearly stating my double major. "Oh, that's just my undergraduate degree," I said lightly. He squinted at it briefly, then turned back to me with a smile. "Computer classes, huh? That's cute. Did you take them to understand your job better?" Again, the moment to correct him, to explain that I hadn't just taken classes, but had graduated summa cum laude in a double major program, followed by a master's in artificial intelligence. Again, I let the moment pass, disturbed by how quickly I was falling into this pattern of allowing his misconceptions to stand. "Something like that," I murmured, as he leaned in for a goodnight kiss. The next morning, I sat in my office at Mitchell, technology, troubled by my own behavior. Why had I downplayed my accomplishments? Why had I allowed Gregory to miscategorize me so completely? Was I really so attracted to him that I was willing to make myself smaller to accommodate his ego? Everything. "Okay, EJ?" David asked, entering with the quarterly projections we were scheduled to review. I looked up at my trusted COO, who had been with me since we'd worked out of my apartment using overturned moving boxes as desks. "David, do you think I'm intimidating?" He laughed, then realized I was serious. "You're a brilliant, successful woman who doesn't suffer fools gladly. Some people find that intimidating, sure. Why?" I explained my dates with Gregory, my uncharacteristic reluctance to correct his assumptions about my career. David settled into the chair across from my desk, his expression thoughtful. "So this guy has no idea he's dating one of Boston's rising tech stars?" "None whatsoever. He thinks I do some vague administrative work in healthcare data. And you like him enough to consider continuing this charade?" It was a fair question. Gregory was charming, handsome, successful in his own right. We shared similar tastes in food, films, travel destinations. When he wasn't explaining things, I already understood or dismissing female achievements, he could be attentive and interesting. There was chemistry between us, undeniably. But more than that, there was something almost liberating about the hours I spent with him. Hours when I wasn't E.J. Mitchell, responsible for a growing company, investors' money, and employees' livelihoods. With Gregory, I was just Elena, enjoying dinner or a show or a sailing trip without the weight of Mitchell technology on my shoulders. "I don't know," I admitted. "Part of me thinks it's ridiculous to even consider continuing to see someone who so fundamentally misunderstands who I am and what I do. But another part enjoys the separation," David suggested. "The chance to have a personal life distinct from your professional identity?" I nodded, grateful for his understanding. "Well, it's not like you'd have to maintain the separation forever," he reasoned. "You could gradually introduce him to the reality of your work, see how he handles it." That seemed reasonable at the time, a temporary bifurcation that would naturally resolve as our relationship deepened. I had no intention of creating a permanent deception, just a temporary simplification while we got to know each other. But then came dinner with his parents a month later, where his father asked about my work and Gregory jumped in to answer for me. Elena works in healthcare administration, very organized, keeps everything running smoothly behind the scenes. And the holiday party where he introduced me to his colleagues as the lovely Elena who does something with medical records when she's not planning the perfect dinner party. And the weekend getaway where he'd laughed indulgently when I'd expressed an opinion on blockchain technology. "Sweetheart, you don't need to pretend to understand crypto to impress me." Each time, correcting the record became more difficult. Each time, explaining why I'd allowed the misconception to persist would have been increasingly awkward. Each time, I told myself I'd address it soon, after his big client meeting, after the holidays, after his father's retirement. By the time he proposed 6 months into our relationship, the division had calcified into something approaching permanence. E.J. Mitchell ran Mitchell Technology during the day, and Elena, soon to be Harrington, accompanied Gregory to dinners and events in the evening, nodding and smiling as he explained the business world to her. It wasn't meant to be forever, just until the right moment. Just until Gregory would be able to accept the truth without feeling deceived or emasculated. Just until... But that moment never came. And 8 years later, I found myself sitting in a hidden office in our shared home, preparing to reveal to the world, and to my husband, that his simple housewife had been building an empire right under his nose. The memory faded as a notification appeared on my screen. 10 minutes until the Bloomberg interview. I took a deep breath, straightening my jacket and checking my appearance one last time. The world was about to meet E.J. Mitchell properly for the first time, not as the reclusive tech CEO who avoided publicity, but as the woman who had built a technology empire while being dismissed as just a housewife. Whatever came next, the media frenzy, the inevitable divorce, the professional and personal adjustments, would be navigated in the open. No more division, no more diminishment, no more pretending to be less than I was to accommodate someone else's ego. As I activated the video link for the interview, I felt lighter somehow. The weight of 8 years of division was lifting, even as new challenges approached. E.J. Mitchell and Elena Harrington were finally, publicly, the same person. The FI. Bloomberg anchor appeared on screen, her expression professionally neutral despite what must have been intense curiosity. "Good morning, Ms. Mitchell, or should I say Mrs. Harrington? Thank you for joining us on what must be an extraordinary day for you." I smiled, feeling the last vestiges of my supportive wife persona fall away. "Good morning, Janet. Please, call me EJ. And yes, today marks the end of a long separation between my personal and professional lives. I'm happy to finally bring them together." The interview had begun, and with it, the next chapter of my life, one where I would never again be dismissed as just anything. The Bloomberg interview lasted 20 minutes. 20 minutes that changed everything. As I fielded questions about my unusual double life, my acquisition of Vertex Industries, and the future of Mitchell Technology, I could feel my two worlds finally, irrevocably merging. "One final question, EJ," the anchor said, leaning forward slightly. "Many viewers are wondering, how did you manage to build a multi-billion-dollar technology company while keeping it secret from your husband for 8 years? It was the question I'd been expecting, the one everyone wanted answered, the sensational heart of the story. "It wasn't as difficult as you might imagine," I replied carefully. "I maintained separate email accounts, phone numbers, and professional spaces. But the truth is, it was primarily possible because Gregory never asked. He was so convinced he already knew who I was and what I was capable of that he never looked beyond his own assumptions." As the interview concluded, I checked my messages. 27 missed calls from Gregory, 15 from his parents, dozens from friends, acquaintances, and business associates. The Bloomberg interview had opened the floodgates, and now everyone wanted to hear directly from me. But there was no time to address personal matters yet. The business of integrating Harrington's former clients into Mitchell Technology required my immediate attention. I had a responsibility to employees and shareholders that came before my imploding marriage. Over the next 4 hours, I held virtual meetings with my integration team, personally called 5 major former Harrington clients to assure them of smooth transitions, and recorded a video message for Mitchell Technology employees explaining the unique circumstances of the acquisition. By late afternoon, the immediate business fires had been contained, and I finally had a moment to consider the personal maelstrom I'd unleashed. My phone rang. David again. "You need to see this," he said without preamble. "Gregory just gave an interview to CNBC. It's not good." I pulled up the video feed on one of my monitors. There was Gregory, sitting in what appeared to be his attorney's office, his appearance restored to its usual polished state, though strain showed around his eyes. "Completely blindsided," he was saying, his voice tight with controlled anger. "I came home from a business meeting to discover that my wife of 8 years has not only been lying about her identity and her career, but has orchestrated the destruction of my family's company." The interviewer leaned forward eagerly. "Are you suggesting that Ms. Mitchell, your wife, deliberately targeted Harrington Solutions because of your personal relationship?" Gregory's expression darkened. "I'm saying that Elena, or EJ or whatever she wants to call herself, used her position as my wife to gather information about my company's operations and clients. She then leveraged that information to execute a hostile takeover disguised as a client acquisition. In my book, that crosses several ethical and possibly legal lines. I watched dispassionately as my husband attempted to reframe the narrative, casting himself as the victim of corporate espionage rather than the architect of his own downfall. It was exactly what I'd expected. Gregory had never been able to accept responsibility for his failures, always looking for someone else to blame. "Are you planning to take legal action?" the interviewer pressed. "My attorneys are reviewing all options," Gregory replied, the corporate equivalent of a threat. "But my immediate concern is for the employees of Harrington Solutions who have been caught in the crossfire of my wife's vendetta." I muted the interview, unable to stomach any more of his self-serving distortions. "He's threatening litigation," I told David. "Have legal prepare for potential claims of corporate espionage, misuse of confidential information, and marital property infringement." "Already on it," David assured me. "For what it's worth, our attorneys believe any such claims would be baseless. All your actions were properly disclosed in SEC filings, and there's no evidence you accessed confidential Harrington information through your personal relationship." That was true enough. I'd been meticulous about maintaining proper corporate boundaries despite my personal connection to Gregory. Every acquisition, every business decision had been made with appropriate due diligence and disclosure. The only thing I hadn't disclosed was that E.J. Mitchell was married to Gregory Harrington, a personal detail not required by securities regulations. "What about the Harrington employees?" I asked. Gregory's accusation about crossfire still ranged. "Where do we stand on the transition offers?" 73 offers prepared for key technical and account management staff, David confirmed. "Ready to go out tomorrow morning if you approve?" I nodded, satisfied. Despite Gregory's insinuations, I had no interest in punishing Harrington's employees for their CEO's failures. The best of them would receive competitive offers to join Mitchell Technology, ensuring continuity for clients and minimal workforce disruption. My secure line rang, a number I didn't recognize. "It's Robert Harrington," my assistant informed me. "Gregory's father. He's quite insistent on speaking with you." I took a deep breath, bracing myself for what would undoubtedly be an unpleasant conversation. "Put him through. Elena, or should I call you EJ now?" Robert's voice was cold with barely contained fury. "I just watched my son on national television, attempting to salvage what's left of his reputation after your little revelation." "Hello, Robert," I replied calmly. "I understand this is shocking for your family." "Shocking?" He barked a harsh laugh. "You've been lying to all of us for 8 years while apparently plotting to dismantle the company I spent my life building. Shocking doesn't begin to cover it." I had always respected Robert Harrington. Unlike his son, the elder Harrington had built Harrington Solutions through genuine innovation and ethical business practices. It was only after Gregory took over that the company had begun cutting corners and compromising standards. "I never planned to dismantle Harrington Solutions," I said quietly. "The client acquisition became necessary when Gregory's leadership, put patient data at risk. If you review the security incidents from the past year, don't lecture me about my own company, he interrupted. Gregory told me about your claims, convenient excuses for corporate sabotage. I sighed, realizing this. Conversation would go no better than the one with Gregory. The Harrington men were remarkably similar in their inability to consider that they might be wrong. The documentation of those security breaches and ethical lapses is all available to Harrington's board, I said firmly. They've reviewed it and made their decision regarding Gregory's leadership. I suggest you do the same before making accusations. Robert was silent for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter but no less intense. You know what I can't understand, Elena? Why the deception? If you were this technology maven all along, why hide it? Why pretend to be something you're not for 8 years? It was a fair question, one I'd been asking myself repeatedly throughout this tumultuous day. I didn't start our relationship intending to hide my professional identity, I explained. But from our earliest dates, Gregory made it clear he wasn't interested in a wife who might equal or exceed his business success. He wanted someone who would support his career, not compete with it. By the time I realized how deeply he needed to believe he was the only achiever in our marriage, we were already committed. So you lied, Robert stated flatly. For 8 years. I allowed him to see what he wanted to see, I corrected, though the distinction felt increasingly meaningless. And yes, I maintain now that was a mistake. One I'm correcting. After ending the call with Robert, I sat back in my chair, feeling the emotional toll of the day catching up with me. In less than 12 hours, I had revealed my true identity to the world, confronted my husband, given a national interview, managed a complex business integration, and been accused of corporate espionage. Even for someone accustomed to high-pressure situations, it was a lot to process. My personal phone buzzed with a text, not from Gregory or his family, but from Claire, my oldest friend who knew both sides of my life. One of the few people I'd trusted with the truth over the years. Just saw the Bloomberg interview. You were brilliant. How are you holding up? Need me to come over with wine and reinforcements? I smiled, grateful for the reminder that not all my relationships were built on deception. Rain check on the wine, I texted back, still handling business fallout. But thank you. As evening approached, I received word that Gregory had returned to our home, accompanied by his attorney. Security cameras showed them removing suitcases and boxes of personal items. He was moving out, the first concrete step toward the dissolution of our marriage. I felt a complex mixture of relief and sadness watching him pack his things from my office monitors, deliberately not going upstairs to face him again. There would be time for another confrontation later, when emotions weren't so raw. My corporate line rang once more. Amanda Reeves from Vertex. Final client transition documents are signed, she reported. And I thought you'd want to know. Harrington's board has named Thomas Jenkins as interim CEO to manage whatever's left of the company. Thomas Jenkins had been Harrington's CFO, a capable, ethical executive who had often found himself at odds with Gregory's more aggressive approach. If anyone could salvage something from Harrington Solutions, it would be him. That's good news, I acknowledged. Have we extended a transition offer to him as well? It's ready to go, Amanda confirmed. Though I suspect he'll decline in favor of trying to rebuild Harrington. He's loyal to the company. As the call ended, I checked the time, 7:30 p.m. 14 hours since the press release that had changed everything. Outside my window, Boston's skyline was lighting up against the darkening sky, the familiar view suddenly seeming different, as if I were seeing it through new eyes. In a way, I was. For the first time in 8 years, I was looking at the world as a whole person, not a carefully divided one. My assistant appeared on the video link. The car is ready whenever you'd like to leave, Ms. Mitchell. Security confirms Mr. Harrington has departed the residence. I nodded, gathering my things. Thank you, Sophie. I'll head home shortly. Home. The word felt strange now. The brownstone had been the stage for my performance as Elena Harrington, dedicated housewife. With that role now abandoned, what would the space become? Would I even want to stay there, surrounded by the carefully curated trappings of a life I'd been pretending to live? These were questions for another day. For now, I had successfully navigated the first phase of my two worlds colliding. The business was secure, the truth was out, and somewhere across Boston, Gregory was beginning to understand the consequences of dismissing his wife as simple for 8 long years. The brownstone was eerily quiet when I finally returned home. Evidence of Gregory's hasty departure was everywhere. Empty spaces on bookshelves, gaps in the closet, the faint scent of his cologne lingering in rooms he'd moved through just hours before. I wandered from room to room, seeing our shared space, with new eyes. How much of this home had actually been mine, and how much had been part of the elaborate performance I'd maintained for 8 years? The kitchen where I'd pretended not to understand financial discussions while mentally reviewing acquisition strategies. The dining room where I'd hosted Gregory's business associates, playing the perfect hostess while recognizing business opportunities they'd missed. The bedroom where I'd lain awake countless nights, wondering if the division I'd created was protection or prison. I found myself drawn to the library, to the hidden office that had been my sanctuary and my secret. No need to hide it anymore. No need for the elaborate security measures that had kept my 2 lives separate. I pressed my palm to the scanner out of habit, watching as the bookshelf slid open to reveal the command center I'd built. For the first time, I left it open. The barrier between Elena Harrington and E.J. Mitchell physically removed, just as it had been metaphorically shattered earlier that day. I poured myself a glass of the whiskey I kept for late work nights, the same brand Gregory had been drinking at our anniversary dinner when he'd dismissed me as a simple housewife in front of Boston's business elite. The irony wasn't lost on me. That dinner had been less than 24 hours ago, yet it felt like it belonged to another lifetime. So much had changed in a single day. My phone buzzed with a text from Sophie. Tomorrow's schedule: board call at 8 a.m., integration team at 9:30, legal. Review at 11. Boston Globe interview at 2. Car will arrive at 7:15. Business as usual, despite the personal earthquake. Mitchell Technology didn't stop for my marital drama, nor should it. We had a major acquisition to integrate, clients to reassure, employees to support. The company I'd built demanded my full attention, now more than ever. I moved to my desk, opening my laptop to review the schedule Sophie had sent, when a framed photo caught my eye. Gregory and me on our honeymoon in Santorini, both of us smiling against a backdrop of white buildings and blue sea. I picked it up, studying his face, so untroubled then, so confident in the life he thought we were building together. Had there ever been a moment when I could have told him the truth? A time when he might have accepted that his wife was not just capable but extraordinarily successful in the very field he considered his domain? I tried to imagine the conversation. Gregory's shock, followed by, what? Pride? Resentment? Insecurity? All of the above? The Gregory I knew would have seen my success as a challenge to his own, a competition he hadn't agreed to enter. He would have felt deceived, emasculated, betrayed. Exactly as he felt now, but perhaps with less public humiliation if I'd told him privately years ago. I set the photo face down on the desk. Whatever possibility might have existed for honesty early in our relationship had vanished long ago, buried under years of his dismissive comments and my quiet acquiescence. We had both contributed to the lie, he by refusing to see beyond his assumptions, I by allowing them to stand unchallenged. The weight of that realization settled heavily on me. For all my strategic brilliance in business, I had made a fundamental error in my personal life, believing that I could indefinitely maintain a division between who I truly was and who my husband thought I was. That such a division could somehow, Form the foundation of a healthy relationship, that I could be fulfilled while hiding a central part of my identity from the person who was supposed to know me best. My quiet refuge in the brownstone suddenly felt stifling. Impulsively, I grabbed my coat and keys, heading out into the cool Boston evening. The security detail assigned after today's revelation fell in behind me at a discreet distance as I walked the familiar streets of Beacon Hill, my neighborhood for the past 7 years. The night air cleared my head, helping me process the whirlwind of the day's events. The revelation, the confrontation with Gregory, the media frenzy, the business, maneuvering. So many moving pieces, so many consequences, both intended and unintended. I found myself approaching the public garden, nearly empty at this late hour. Sitting on a bench overlooking the lagoon, I finally allowed myself the luxury of examining my feelings without the pressure of immediate business concerns or public scrutiny. Relief was predominant. The profound relief of no longer living a divided life, of being able to be wholly myself in all contexts. But beneath that was a complex mixture of grief, regret, and uncertainty about the future. Grief for the marriage that, while built on a fundamental deception, had still contained moments of genuine connection and happiness. Regret for not finding the courage to be honest earlier, before the pattern of deception became so entrenched that only a dramatic rupture could break it. Uncertainty about navigating a world where my professional and personal identities were now inextricably linked in the public consciousness. My phone buzzed again. David checking in. Just making sure you're okay. Security says you went for a walk? Needed some air, I texted back. Processing everything. I'm fine. For what it's worth, he replied after a moment. I think you did the right thing. Long overdue. Was it, though? The right thing would have been honesty from the beginning, either telling Gregory who I really was, or walking away when it became clear he wasn't interested in a partner who might eclipse him professionally. Instead, I'd chosen a third path, one that had ultimately led to public revelation and private devastation. Yet as I sat in the quiet garden, watching moonlight reflect off the still water, I couldn't entirely regret the choices that had led me here. They had been compromises, yes, but they had also allowed me to build Mitchell Technology into what it was today, a company that was changing healthcare data management for the better, that employed thousands of people, that was genuinely making a positive difference in the world. If maintaining my separate identities had been the price of that accomplishment, perhaps it had been worth paying, for a time. But the cost had grown too high, especially as Gregory's business practices began to threaten the very values Mitchell Technology stood for. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, more media interviews, complex integration work, inevitable legal skirmishes with Gregory and his attorneys. But for the first time in 8 years, I would face those challenges as a whole person, not a carefully compartmentalized one. As I stood to continue my walk, a sense of resolution settled over me. The path forward would not be easy, but it would be authentic. No more pretending to be less than I was. No more nodding and smiling while my husband explained basic concepts I had mastered years before. No more simple housewife. Whatever came next, divorce proceedings, public scrutiny, business reorganization, I would face it as the woman I truly was. E.J. Mitchell, CEO of Mitchell Technology Partners, and Elena Jane Harrington, soon to reclaim her maiden name along with her complete identity. 2 weeks passed in a blur of business integration, media management, and legal maneuvering. The story of E.J. Mitchell's true identity had captivated the business world, spawning countless articles, analyses, and opinion pieces with titles like The CEO Next Door and Hiding in Plain Sight, the woman who fooled Boston's business elite. Mitchell. Technology's stock had stabilized after an initial surge, as investors recognized that the company's fundamentals remained strong regardless of the personal drama surrounding its CEO. The integration of Harrington's former clients was proceeding smoothly, with minimal disruption to services. And remarkably, 68 of the 73 Harrington employees we'd extended offers to had accepted positions at Mitchell Technology, a testament to the competitive packages we'd put together and the reputational strength of our company. Had settled into a new routine, working openly from Mitchell Technology's downtown headquarters rather than my hidden home office, giving carefully selected interviews to shape the narrative around my revelation, and beginning the process of rebuilding my personal life without the constraints of my former deception. Gregory, meanwhile, had retreated to his parents' summer home on Cape Cod, emerging only for his increasingly desperate media appearances and meetings with his attorneys. Each interview seemed to dig him deeper into his narrative of victimhood, each legal threat more baseless than the last. His latest claim, that my fraudulent representation as a simple housewife constituted some form of marital misrepresentation that entitled him to a share of Mitchell Technology, had been laughed out of his own attorney's office, according to industry gossip. I was reviewing acquisition projections in my office when David appeared at my door, his expression unusually serious. "We've received a settlement proposal from Gregory's attorneys," he said, placing a folder on my desk. "It's creative." I opened the folder with a sense of weary resignation. For 2 weeks, Gregory had been cycling through various legal theories, each designed to extract maximum financial compensation for what he perceived as my betrayal. None had gained any traction, but he seemed determined to find an angle that would work. The document inside outlined a proposal that made me sit back in my chair, genuinely surprised for the first time in this ongoing saga. "He wants a job?" I asked, looking up at David in disbelief. David nodded, his expression carefully neutral. "According to this, he'll drop all claims and legal actions against you and Mitchell Technology in exchange for 3 things: a substantial divorce settlement, an NDA preventing you from discussing your marriage publicly, and, most surprisingly, a senior executive position at Mitchell Technology." I stared at the document, trying to process Gregory's request. After all his public accusations and threats, after his insistence that I had destroyed his reputation and career through deception, he now wanted to work for me? It made no logical sense. "This can't be serious," I said finally. "He spent 2 weeks telling anyone who'll listen that I'm an underhanded corporate spy who used our marriage to steal his clients. Now he wants me to hire him?" "His financial situation may be driving this," David suggested. "Harrington Solutions is in freefall. His reputation in the industry is damaged. Executive recruitment firms won't touch him. He's essentially unemployable at his former level." The realization of Gregory's predicament settled over me. His company was collapsing. His family's legacy business was in ruins. His professional reputation had been severely compromised, partly by his own ethical lapses and partly by his unhinged media appearances since our separation. For a man whose entire identity was built around business success, it must have been devastating. For a brief moment, I felt a flicker of sympathy. Then I remembered his words at our anniversary dinner just 2 weeks ago. A simple housewife like Elena wouldn't understand the complexities of corporate acquisition strategy. His dismissive laughter, his toast to the wives who know when to step back and let business happen. "What does legal think?" I asked, my voice hardening. "They recommend rejecting the employment demand outright while negotiating on the settlement and NDA," David replied. From a purely business perspective, having Gregory in any executive position would be disruptive and potentially harmful to company culture. I nodded, processing this analysis. And from a personal perspective, it would be absolutely intolerable. "Prepare a counteroffer. I'll agree to a reasonable but not excessive settlement. I'll consider an NDA that protects both parties equally. But under no circumstances will Gregory Harrington hold any position at Mitchell Technology." As David left to convey my response to legal, I turned to the window, gazing out at the Boston skyline. The audacity of Gregory's request was breathtaking. After years of dismissing my business capabilities, He now wanted to benefit from the very success he'd mocked. After weeks of publicly attacking my character and ethics, he wanted me to entrust him with a leadership role in my company. It was the clearest evidence yet that Gregory had learned nothing from this experience, that he still viewed the world entirely through the lens of his own interests, without any real recognition of his role in creating this situation. My phone buzzed with a text from Claire. "Lunch? I'm downstairs in the lobby. Figured you could use a break from all the drama." Grateful for the interruption, I headed down to meet my oldest friend. As we walked to a nearby restaurant, Claire linked her arm through mine, her expression sympathetic. "How are you really doing?" she asked once we were seated. "And don't give me the CEO answer you've been feeding the press." I smiled, appreciating her directness. "I'm adjusting. Business is actually the easy part. It's the personal fallout that's more complicated." "Have you heard from him directly? Not through lawyers, I mean." I shook my head. "Not since he moved out 2 weeks ago. Everything's been through attorneys." Claire snorted. "Until today's ridiculous job request. I mean, seriously? The man spent your entire marriage treating you like you couldn't possibly understand his business world, and now he wants you to give him an executive position? The audacity is almost impressive." "It's desperation," I corrected. "He's running out of options. His professional identity was everything to him, and now it's in shambles." "Because of his own actions," Claire pointed out. "The security breaches, the ethical corners cut. Those were his decisions. You just finally stopped covering for him." She was right, of course. Gregory's downfall was primarily self-inflicted. Yet I couldn't help feeling that my public revelation had been unnecessarily destructive. Could I have found a way to address the business issues without the personal humiliation? "Maybe," I acknowledged. "But it's too late for that now. We've reached the point of no return. Whatever happens next, there's no going back to how things were before." Claire reached across the table to squeeze my hand. "That's a good thing. Elena, living a divided life was taking a toll on you, even if you didn't realize it. I saw it happening year by year, how you'd check yourself in conversations, how you'd dim your light when Gregory was around. You deserve to shine at full brightness." Her words resonated more deeply than I'd expected, touching on a truth I'd been reluctant to fully acknowledge. The division I'd maintained for 8 years hadn't just been a practical arrangement. It had been a form of self-suppression, a constant dimming of who I truly was to accommodate someone else's need to feel superior. "What will you do about his request?" Claire asked as our lunch arrived. "Reject the employment demand completely," I replied without hesitation. "Negotiate reasonably on the financial settlement and NDA. Move forward. And if he escalates again?" I considered this possibility, knowing Gregory's tendency to lash out when he didn't get his way. "Then we'll handle it. But I won't have him in my company, undermining my leadership and disrupting the culture we've built." As we finished lunch and walked back toward Mitchell Technologies headquarters, I felt a growing certainty that this latest proposal represented a critical juncture in the ongoing saga of my revelation. By refusing to employ Gregory, I was making a definitive statement, not just legally or professionally, but personally. I was declaring once and for all that I would no longer subordinate my judgment to his ego, no longer pretend to be less, to make him feel more. We had indeed reached the point of no return, and I was finally ready to embrace whatever lay on the other side. The following month unfolded with the precision of a well-engineered algorithm. On the business front, Mitchell Technology completed the integration of former Harrington clients ahead of schedule. Our stock price rose an additional 12% on strong quarterly results, and industry analysts praised the seamless transition that had occurred despite the dramatic circumstances surrounding the acquisition. On the personal front, my divorce proceedings with Gregory had begun in earnest. His demand for an executive position had been swiftly rejected, but negotiations over financial settlement terms continued through our respective attorneys. I had offered what my legal team considered more than generous, our Beacon Hill brownstone, a substantial cash settlement, and an agreement that neither of us would publicly disparage the other going forward. Gregory's team had countered with increasingly unreasonable demands, seemingly more intent on dragging out the process than reaching resolution. Meanwhile, Harrington Solutions continued its downward spiral. Thomas Jenkins, the interim CEO, was doing his best to stabilize what remained of the company, but without Vertex Industries and the other major clients that had followed them to Mitchell Technology, Harrington was operating at a severe deficit. Industry rumors suggested they would soon be forced to either sell or declare bankruptcy. I was reviewing acquisition proposals for a promising medical AI startup when David appeared at my office door, an unusual tension evident in his posture. "We've just received some concerning information," he said, closing the door behind him. "Gregory's been meeting with Westlake Partners." I set down my tablet, instantly alert. Westlake Partners was a notorious private equity firm known for hostile takeovers and aggressive cost-cutting. Their interest in any company typically signaled trouble. "What kind of meeting?" I asked, though I could already guess the answer. "According to our source, he's trying to interest them in backing a takeover attempt of Mitchell Technology," David confirmed, his expression grim. "Using his position as your husband to claim he has insight into vulnerabilities in our operation." Leaned back in my chair, processing this latest development. After failing to secure a position within Mitchell Technology, Gregory was now attempting to gain control through external means. It was a desperate move, but potentially troubling if Westlake took him seriously. "Do we know if Westlake is receptive?" David shook his head. "Unclear at this point. Our source says they've had 3 meetings, which suggests at least some level of interest." I nodded, my mind already analyzing potential responses. Have legal prepare a comprehensive briefing on Gregory's lack of actual knowledge about our operations. Emphasize that his claimed insights would be 8 years out of date at best and completely fictional at worst. Also, accelerate the divorce proceedings. I want to sever any legal connection that might give him leverage. As David left to implement these directives, I turned to my window, gazing out at the Boston skyline. Gregory's latest maneuver wasn't entirely surprising. His entire identity had been built around business success and the perception of control. The public revelation of my true role, coupled with the collapse of his company, had stripped him of both. This attempt to seize control of Mitchell Technology was as much about restoring his self-image as it was about financial gain. My phone buzzed with a text from Sophie. "Amanda Reeves on line 3. Says it's urgent regarding Gregory Harrington." I picked up immediately. "Amanda? What's happening?" "Just got out of a lunch with Kevin Westlake," she said without preamble. "He wanted to explore my insights into Mitchell Technology's operations, given my role at Vertex. Pretty obvious Gregory's been making claims about potential vulnerabilities." "What did you tell him?" "That Mitchell Technology is the most efficiently run organization I've ever worked with, that any vulnerabilities Gregory claims to know about would be pure fiction, and that any attempt to destabilize the company would be met with unified resistance from all major clients and partners." I could hear the smile in her voice. "Kevin's no fool. He knows when he's being fed bad information." Relief washed over me. "Thank you, Amanda." "Don't thank me for telling the truth," she replied, simply. "Gregory seems determined to self-destruct. Rumors are flying that he's burning through cash at an alarming rate. Expensive hotels, fancy restaurants, private jets. Almost like he's trying to maintain the appearance of success while everything crumbles around him." After ending the call, I spent the afternoon in strategy sessions, reviewing security protocols and preparing contingency plans. By evening, our intelligence suggested the immediate threat from Westlake Partners had receded. They had declined to move forward with Gregory's proposal after conducting basic due diligence. Yet something about Gregory's increasingly desperate moves continued to trouble me. His behavior was becoming more erratic, his attempts to regain control more extreme. It painted a portrait of a man spiraling dangerously downward, unable to accept the new reality of his situation. My concern was not for Gregory's financial future. He would emerge from our divorce with more than enough to live comfortably, regardless of his current spending habits. Rather, I worried about what other schemes he might attempt in his desperate bid to reclaim his former status and strike back at me for what he perceived as betrayal. That evening, as I worked late in my office, I received an unexpected call from Thomas Jenkins, the interim CEO of Harrington Solutions. "I thought you should hear this directly from me," he began, his voice heavy with resignation. "The board has voted to file for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. We'll be making the announcement tomorrow morning." Though not unexpected, the news still landed with the weight of finality. Harrington Solutions, the company Gregory's father had built over decades, the legacy Gregory had been entrusted to protect, would now join the long list of failed businesses, its assets sold to pay creditors, its name likely to disappear entirely. I'm why. "Sorry, Thomas," I said, meaning it sincerely. "I know you did everything possible to prevent this outcome." "The problems ran too deep," he replied simply. "Gregory's mismanagement left us with few options, but that's not why I'm calling. There's something else you should know." I braced myself, sensing bad news. Gregory came to our offices today, demanding access to archived emails and client files. When our security team refused, he became volatile. There was an altercation. Police were called. My breath caught. Was anyone hurt? No, thankfully, but Gregory was escorted from the premises and warned not to return. "Elena, he's not well. His behavior was erratic, almost manic. He kept insisting he needed the files to prove some conspiracy between you and Vertex Industries dating back years." The picture Thomas painted was disturbing. Gregory unraveling under the pressure of his collapsing world, grasping at conspiracy theories to explain away his failures. It was sad, certainly, but also potentially dangerous. A man in Gregory's state, with his resources and connections, could cause serious problems if his fixation on me continued to escalate. "Thank you for the warning," I told Thomas, "and for everything you've tried to do for Harrington." After ending the call, I contacted my security team to update them on the situation, then reached out to my attorney to discuss expediting the divorce proceedings further. The sooner I could legally sever ties with Gregory, the better. As I finally left the office that night, escorted by security to my waiting car, I couldn't shake the sense that we were approaching another critical juncture, that Gregory's mounting desperation was building toward some kind of dramatic action. The only question was what form it would take and how prepared we would be to handle it when it came. My phone buzzed with one last notification for the day, a news alert from the Boston Business Journal. Breaking: Harrington Solutions to file for bankruptcy. Former CEO Gregory Harrington, unavailable for comment. Tomorrow would bring a new wave of media attention, a fresh round of questions about my role in Harrington's downfall, and likely another desperate move from Gregory as he watched his family's legacy formally collapse. The countdown to his next action had begun, and all I could do was prepare as thoroughly as possible for whatever came next. The formal announcement of Harrington Solutions' bankruptcy dominated the business news cycle for precisely one day before being overshadowed by larger economic stories. The company that Gregory's father had spent decades building, that had once been a respected player in Boston's tech scene, disappeared from public attention with barely a ripple, its failure deemed unremarkable in the fast-paced world of business. For 3 days following the bankruptcy announcement, Gregory seemed to vanish. He missed a scheduled meeting with his divorce attorneys, failed to respond to court filings, and made no public statements about Harrington's collapse. His parents, when contacted by my legal team regarding settlement matters, admitted they hadn't heard from him either. His sudden silence was more concerning than his previous outbursts. In my experience, Gregory retreating from view never signaled acceptance or resolution. It meant he was planning something, regrouping for what he considered a strategic countermove. I maintained my regular schedule through this unsettling quiet. Period. Leading board meetings, reviewing acquisition proposals, giving a keynote address at a healthcare technology conference. Externally, everything proceeded with business-as-usual efficiency. Internally, I operated with heightened vigilance, waiting for whatever Gregory might have planned. On the fourth day of his disappearance, I received an unexpected email from Gregory himself, the first direct communication since our confrontation, at the brownstone 6 weeks earlier. Elena, or should I call you EJ? I've been doing a lot of thinking during these past few days. The bankruptcy of Harrington Solutions, my family's legacy, has forced me to reevaluate many things, including my approach to our separation. While I still believe your deception during our marriage was profound and damaging, I recognize that my recent actions have been counterproductive and perhaps irrational. The incident at Harrington's offices was inexcusable, as were my attempts to involve Westlake Partners in what should remain a private matter between us. I'm prepared to accept the settlement terms your attorneys proposed 3 weeks ago. The brownstone, the financial package, the mutual non-disparagement agreement, all of it. I just want this chapter closed so we can both move forward. There is one additional request, however. I'd like to meet with you in person, one final time, before the papers are signed, not to renegotiate terms, but simply to achieve some personal closure. Perhaps at the Harbor Cafe tomorrow at 10 a.m., neutral territory, public setting. Let me know if this is acceptable. Gregory. I read the email 3 times, searching for the hidden agenda that must lie beneath this sudden reasonableness. The Gregory I knew didn't concede defeat, didn't acknowledge mistakes, and certainly didn't seek closure through calm conversation. This abrupt change in tone after weeks of escalating, hostility felt calculated rather than genuine. I forwarded the email to my attorney with a brief note. Thoughts? Her response came quickly. Suspicious timing after his disappearance. If you agree to meet, public location is good, but bring security. Alternatively, we can proceed with settlement without this meeting. David's assessment was even more direct. It's a trap of some kind. Whatever closure he's looking for, it isn't the healthy, mature kind. Yet despite these warnings, I found myself considering Gregory's request. Perhaps it was the surprisingly reflective tone of his email. Perhaps it was my own desire for a cleaner ending than our last angry confrontation. Or perhaps it was simple, curiosity about what he might have to say after weeks of indirect communication through attorneys and publicity stunts. After careful consideration, I replied, Gregory, I agree that personal closure would be beneficial before finalizing our divorce. I will meet you at Harbor Cafe tomorrow at 10 a.m., but I'll be bringing my security team, who will maintain a discreet distance. If your intention is truly to achieve resolution rather than create another confrontation, I welcome the opportunity. Elena with. That appointment set, I turned my attention back to business matters, though my thoughts continued to circle back to Gregory's unexpected email and what might be behind his sudden change of approach. That evening, as I prepared to leave the office, Sophie appeared at my door with an elegantly wrapped package. This just arrived for you, she said, placing it on my desk. It's been through security screening. The small box bore no card or note, just my name written in what I recognized as Gregory's distinctive handwriting. Inside was a velvet jewelry case containing the pearl earrings I'd worn on our first date, earrings I'd left behind in the brownstone when I'd moved to a downtown apartment after our separation. The gesture was oddly sentimental, especially given the acrimony that had characterized our interactions since the revelation of my identity. Was this another calculated move, an attempt to lower my defenses before our meeting? Or could it be a genuine peace offering? A signal that Gregory had finally accepted the reality of our situation? I placed the earrings in my desk drawer, unsure what to make of them. Whatever Gregory's intentions, I would approach tomorrow's meeting with caution, expecting the unexpected from a man whose world had collapsed and who still, perhaps, blamed me for that collapse. As I left Mitchell Technologies' headquarters that evening, the city settling into twilight around me, I felt the strange stillness that often precedes significant events, the calm before the storm. Tomorrow's meeting might bring genuine resolution, or it might bring a fresh round of conflict. Either way, it represented another step toward the final conclusion of the marriage that had defined the past 8 years of my life. My security detail escorted me to my waiting car, more visible than usual after Gregory's recent erratic behavior. Harbor Cafe, 9:30 tomorrow morning, I instructed the driver. I want to arrive before Gregory does. As we pulled away from the curb, I gazed out at Boston's illuminated skyline, the same view I'd looked at countless times over the years. First as the secretly powerful E.J. Mitchell, then as the publicly revealed CEO navigating personal and professional fallout. Whatever happened tomorrow, I would face it as my complete self. No more divisions, no more diminishment, no more pretending to be less than I was. The storm, whatever form it might take, would find me ready. Harbor Cafe occupied a prime location. On Boston's waterfront, its wall of windows offering spectacular views of the harbor. I arrived 30 minutes early as planned, selecting a corner table that gave me clear sightlines to both the entrance and the street outside. My security team positioned themselves discreetly, one at the bar, another at a nearby table, a third outside monitoring the approach. The restaurant was busy enough to provide the anonymity of ambient conversation, but not so crowded that privacy would be impossible. I ordered a coffee and reviewed some reports on my tablet while waiting, outwardly calm despite the tension coiling inside me. At precisely 10 a.m., Gregory walked through the door. The 6 weeks since our last confrontation had changed him. He'd lost weight, deep lines had formed around his eyes, and his usually immaculate appearance showed subtle signs of neglect. His suit, while still expensive, hung slightly loose on his frame, and his typically perfect haircut had grown out. He spotted me immediately, nodding to acknowledge my security before approaching the table. "Thank you for coming," he said, his voice softer than I'd expected. "I wasn't sure you would." "You said you wanted closure," I replied evenly. "That's something I want as well." He sat across from me, ordering coffee when the server approached. For a moment, we simply regarded each other in silence. Two people who had shared 8 years of marriage now facing each other as virtual strangers. "Harrington Solutions is gone," he said finally, staring into his coffee as it arrived. 70 years of business history ended. My father won't speak to me. My mother cries whenever I call. My friends have mostly disappeared. And the woman I thought was my supportive wife turns out to be a business magnate who's been deceiving me for our entire relationship. The bitterness in his voice was tempered with something else, a weariness that suggested he had exhausted his anger and was left only with resignation. "I didn't set out to deceive you, Gregory," I said, the familiar explanation feeling inadequate even as I offered it. "It began as a simple omission that became harder to correct with time." He looked up, meeting my eyes directly. "I've had 6 weeks to think about that explanation. At first I didn't believe it. I was convinced you had orchestrated some elaborate scheme to infiltrate my life and destroy my company." He laughed hollowly. "Paranoid, right? But that's what happens when your entire reality shifts overnight." I remained silent, allowing him to continue. Then I started looking back at our relationship with fresh eyes. All those times I explained basic business concepts to you. All those dismissive comments about your charity work. All those moments when you called me a simple housewife? I supplied, unable to keep the edge from my voice. He winced. "Yes, among other things." He took a sip of his coffee. I've been seeing a therapist these past 2 weeks. Not voluntarily at first. My parents insisted after the incident at Harrington's offices. But it's been illuminating. This was not the conversation I had expected. I had prepared for accusations, for manipulation, for thinly veiled threats, not for what appeared to be genuine self-reflection. I had to face some uncomfortable truths, Gregory continued, about why I needed you to be just a housewife, about why your success feels like my failure, about why I've been spiraling into increasingly desperate attempts to regain control. He pulled a folder from his briefcase and placed it on the table between us. These are the signed settlement papers, accepting your terms completely. No contests, no further demands. I stared at the folder, suspicion still overriding my desire to believe in this transformed version of my husband. Just like that? After weeks of fighting every term? Not just like that. After weeks of losing everything I valued and finally being forced to look at my own role in that loss. He pushed the folder toward me. I'm not asking for forgiveness, Elena. I know I've behaved abominably, both during our marriage and after your revelation. I'm simply trying to end this chapter with some small shred of dignity intact. I opened the folder, scanning the documents inside. They appeared to be exactly as described, the settlement terms my lawyers had proposed, signed without modification. Still, caution kept me from fully accepting this sudden change. What happens after this? I asked, closing the folder without signing my portion yet. What are your plans, Gregory? A flash of something, vulnerability perhaps, crossed his face, before he composed himself. I've received a job offer. Nothing like what I had before, but something that will allow me to rebuild slowly. Away from Boston, away from the constant reminders of my failures here. What kind of position? He hesitated, then gave a self-deprecating smile. Entry-level business development at a tech startup in Austin. Ironic, isn't it? The former CEO of Harrington Solutions starting over at the bottom rung. I studied his expression, searching for signs of deception or hidden resentment. What I saw instead was a complicated mixture of humiliation, resignation, and perhaps a hint of relief. The startup, I began, a suspicion forming. What's it called? Meridian Healthcare Solutions, he replied. Small but promising. Specializes in patient data management systems. I set down my coffee cup carefully. Meridian is a Mitchell Technology subsidiary, one of our innovation incubators. Gregory's eyes widened fractionally before understanding dawned. You knew. No, I said honestly. Our HR handles thousands of positions across dozens of subsidiaries. I don't review entry-level hires. But now that you know, you'll block it, he stated. Not a question, but a resigned conclusion. I considered this unexpected development. Gregory, Harrington, who had once dismissed me as a simple housewife, unwittingly applying to work within my corporate structure. The irony was almost too perfect. Actually, I said after a moment's reflection, I won't interfere. If you got the offer, it means you qualified for the position on your own merits. What happens next will depend entirely on your performance, not on our history. Relief washed over his features, followed quickly by something like shame. I don't deserve that consideration. This isn't about what you deserve, I replied. It's about closing one chapter and allowing another to begin. For both of us. I reached for the settlement papers, signing my portion with the Mont Blanc, pen I'd carried to my first major acquisition meeting years ago. Consider it the closure you asked for. As I slid the signed papers back across the table, I realized that this was indeed the end of the story Gregory and I had begun 8 years ago. Not with the dramatic confrontation I'd anticipated, but with a quiet acknowledgement of mistakes made and lessons painfully learned. Goodbye, Gregory, I said, standing to leave. I wish you well at Meridian. Just remember, in business, as in life, It's never wise to underestimate anyone, regardless of title or appearance. He nodded, understanding the gentle warning in my words. Goodbye, Elena. Or should I say Ms. Mitchell? I smiled slightly. Either works. They're both me. 3 months after our final meeting at Harbor Cafe, the divorce between Elena Mitchell and Gregory Harrington was finalized with little fanfare. The business press, having exhausted the sensational aspects of our story, had moved on to fresher scandals. Mitchell Technology continued its upward trajectory, with our healthcare data solutions now implemented in over 500 hospitals nationwide. The former clients of Harrington Solutions had seamlessly integrated into our systems, with many reporting improved performance and security under our management. I had fully settled into my public identity as E.J. Mitchell, no longer hiding behind the fiction of a simple foundation director. Board meetings, industry conferences, media interviews. I navigated them all as my complete self, finding a liberation in this integration that I hadn't anticipated. The weight of maintaining 2 separate identities had been heavier than I'd realized until it was lifted. The brownstone in Beacon Hill had been sold, neither of us wanting to remain in a space so filled with the echoes of our divided life together. I'd moved to a penthouse overlooking the harbor, its open, light-filled spaces representing the transparency I now embraced in all aspects of my life. As for Gregory, reports from Meridian Healthcare Solutions indicated he was performing adequately in his role, not exceptionally, but solidly. He had relocated to Austin as planned, beginning the process of rebuilding his life and career far from the ruins of his former company and marriage. Monthly performance evaluations crossed my desk not because I requested them, but as part of the standard reporting from all subsidiaries. I reviewed them with professional detachment, neither intervening to help nor hinder his progress. 6 months after the Harbor Cafe meeting, I received a brief email from Gregory. Elena, I've just discovered that Meridian is a Mitchell Technology subsidiary. One of my colleagues mentioned it casually, assuming I knew. The irony isn't lost on me. I considered resigning immediately, but after reflection, I've decided to stay, if you'll allow it. There's a certain poetic justice in working my way up from the bottom in your organization after years of dismissing your business acumen. For what it's worth, I'm doing well here. The work is challenging but rewarding. My therapist calls it growth through humility. I call it getting what I deserve. I won't ask for special treatment or consideration. In fact, I'd prefer if you continue to let me succeed or fail on my own merits. Thank you for not blocking my employment when you discovered it. That grace was more than I deserved. Gregory, I read the email several times, noting the absence of bitterness or entitlement that would have characterized the Gregory I had married. In its place was a measured acceptance of his circumstances and what appeared to be genuine commitment to rebuilding through honest work. After careful consideration, I replied simply, Gregory, your position at Meridian is based on your qualifications and performance, nothing more or less. That won't change now that you're aware of the corporate structure. I wish you continued success in your role. E.J. Mitchell, the story that had begun with a husband mocking his simple housewife, had come full circle. The man who had dismissed my capabilities now worked within the corporate empire I had built, starting at the very bottom of the ladder he had once presumed I couldn't even climb. Not revenge, I reflected as I closed the email. Just the natural consequences of underestimating someone based on assumptions and appearances. A lesson that would serve Gregory well in his new beginning, as it would anyone wise enough to learn from his mistakes. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.